Hello, hello all. Thank you for coming tonight. We're so glad to be on the island so that we can hear more from the residents that are here and bring you some of our thinking and policies as well. So let's just begin. Should we go ahead?
For the record, this is the November 13th, 2019 Treasure Island Development Authority Board special meeting. Item number 1, call to order. Director Sen.
Here.
Director Dunlop.
Here.
Director Giusti.
Here.
Director Lai.
Present.
Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Kwan.
Here.
Director Schifrin.
Here.
Supervisor Haney.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item number 2, general public comment. This item is to allow members of the public to address the Treasure Island Development Authority Board on matters that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Authority Board and that do not appear on today's agenda. In addition to general public comment will be held during each item on the agenda. Members of the public shall address their remarks to commissioners as a whole and not to an individual commissioner or TIDA staff. Neither commissioners nor TIDA staff may engage in discussion of items not on the agenda. But commissioners may ask clarifying questions and gather information to place the item on a future agenda. Individual commissioners shall refrain, however, from entering into debates or discussions with speakers during public comment. Members of the public may address the board once per agenda item for up to 3 minutes. You will hear a single chime when there are 30 seconds remaining. Prior to making your comments, please state your name and the organization you are representing, if any, for the record.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? And these are just for items which are not on the agenda. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. President Fay, directors, Walt Bolofsky, Treasure Island Museum. I just wanted to briefly tell you about a wonderful synergistic collaboration opportunity we had. Some of you may remember our Port Chicago exhibit that we put together with help from San Francisco Public Library and National Park Service. And they mounted a copy of that exhibition in the African American History Center of the library in July during the anniversary month of the explosion. Well, once they took it down, we were able to secure those panels, and our staff mounted them at the Life Learning Academy. And next slide, please. And David Burge, the U.S. history teacher, was able to use them to put together a curriculum for his class at LLA. After they're done with them, we'll try to find other places to put that panel. So we basically got a second free traveling copy of the exhibit out of the Port Chicago thing. We were hoping Jamal would be here to help talk about this. He wasn't able to make it, but we wanted to let you know we're exploring further opportunities for collaboration with LLA, and we hope to be able to come back to you in the future, tell you about more work like that. Thank you.
Thank you. No.
Short people. My name is Carol Harvey. Hello, TIDA board. I'm a journalist. I've been writing about Treasure Island for about 6 years. And I just want to say that I'm so impressed with Treasure Islanders who are asked to put up with a lot. And they really handled it with grace. The power outages, so many of them, and the tolls that I hope will be discussed tonight, the affordable housing problem, whether people can stay or not. And there's more. This summer, townhouses sprouted signs saying there were contaminants in the immediate area of their building, but the word area was not defined. People got worried that the Navy was finally admitting that the island was dangerously toxic. But no, the Navy did not post these signs. These signs were posted by the villages to honor Prop 65, because in this year, the state told property managers to let people in rental units know what toxins are inside their buildings. And this was done this year, and these signs were posted from March to July. And people were worried about this. The residents deserve to know what kind of contaminants are inside their buildings and in the grounds around their buildings. And radiation and chemicals are all over Treasure Island. They're all under the soil, they're under the buildings, they're under every part of Treasure Island. And this is well documented by the Navy. Recently, a basketball-sized bunch of radiation was dug out from under the front step and the porch of a townhouse on Bayside Drive that was dangerously radioactive. People don't know that this happened here, but this is quite alarming. Also, at North Point, they reopened the North Point solid waste disposal area, and the Navy is digging potholes in that area, and the potholes have radiation signs on them, on fences around these potholes, and the potholes are right next to the buildings.
I'm sorry, Carol. We're imposing a 3-minute timeline, and so you're 3 minutes is what you have. Thank you. Thank you. Next person, please.
Good evening, President Sen and members of the TIDA board. My name is Jim Hancock. I'm the president of the San Francisco Sailing Science Center. First, want to acknowledge all of you for all of the hard work that you already have done and the work that you are doing to revitalize Treasure Island. Thank you very much for that. I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude. I have a letter that I'd like to read, and I just gave to Secretary Austin. This is a letter to TIDA and TIDG. The San Francisco Sailing Science Center is a California nonprofit public benefit corporation formed with the vision of creating an interactive science museum framed around sailing. The museum will be filled with hands-on interactive exhibits and will cater to families, school kids, tourists, and the curious. It will be a source of employment, a center for education, and a destination attraction for the island. Its audience will be anyone who wants to learn and have fun. We believe that locating the Sailing Science Center on Treasure Island in the vicinity of the Treasure Island Sailing Center, the U.S. Olympic Training Facility, the Treasure Island Marina, and Clipper Cove will add value to Treasure Island and the city of San Francisco. Simultaneously, being an educational museum that attracts people to the island and integrates well with the existing community will help TIDA and TIDG reach their goals as expressed in the June 2011 DDA. Specifically, we believe that Hangar 3 is the ideal location for the Sailing Science Center, and that the Sailing Science Center will be the ideal tenant for that location. We are therefore using this letter to formally register our interest in leasing all or part of Hangar 3 as the future home to the San Francisco Sailing Science Center. Best regards, James Hancock. So I'd like to go off script now and just say that I understand that the development moving toward eastward from Building 1 toward Hangar 3 is a long process, and from hearing Kevin Griffith's presentation at the CAB a couple weeks ago, I guess last week, understand that that's probably not going to happen until 2025 or even 2027. This is completely in line with our own timeline, and I think fits quite well. So we just would like to get in the conversation and be on the record now that we do have an interest in locating in Hangar 3. And thank you very much for your attention and time tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Next person.
How's it going? My name is Barclay Sanders. I'm a Treasure Island resident, and I just wanted to ask for TIDA and SFPUC to contact Tesla to use their battery backup technology that they used in Puerto Rico to help solve the problems, because we all know that the grid is extremely antiquated and old here, kind of the similar that it is in Puerto Rico. And I know that there's work being done on the corner of the island to put a new power switch, but I think it would be in the best interest of everyone here and the work that you guys are doing to try to contact Tesla at tesla.com/utilities. Tesla has done a lot and has helped a lot of low-income communities and communities that have these power outage problems. And other communities like in San Jose and in Oakland and Jack London Square had implemented a plan to install 6,000 batteries and solar on houses to help deal with the power outages that were the cause of like PG&E. I'm also hoping that some people that are here today could kind of look into what Scott Wiener was talking about of how PG&E's current model of being like investor-owned, kind of like how TIDA owns the grid here, so it doesn't allow the FSPUC to actually upgrade it, or they can only maintain it. So kind of how the San Francisco government offered to buy all the utility equipment within the city. I think it could be in the best interest of everyone here to solve this power outage problem, but also for the residents, for the San Francisco government to put in an order to buy the equipment that's on the island, so that the people that are maintaining the grid, the FFPUC, can just upgrade it and modernize it now and not make the current residents have to wait up until the redevelopment happens, because we've basically experienced over 150 power outages in the last 20 years, and there's a ton of food spoilage. There's just a ton of work that you guys are doing, but I think we really could leverage Tesla to help solve this problem. So that's essentially what I wanted to express today. I really hope that everyone here could just go to tesla.com/utilities and put in a request for seeing how Tesla could help with the power outage problem. That's essentially my comment.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. You don't work for Tesla, do you? No, I don't. You should.
My name's John Talbot. I live on North Point Drive, and I work for a utility company. And a sort of an ancillary part of my job is intermittently I have to place generators and be involved with the planning of the placement of generators. So I have a couple of suggestions. One, the first step in, first of all, you guys need to subscribe to some sort of generator service, and that's just a contract. If you throw money at a generator company, they will provide you with the service. And how it works is, first, they would have to come identify the need, so maybe at least medically vulnerable residents and businesses that have freezers and food spoilage or have a high public patronage every day, like the two stores and the restaurant. So you don't have to do the whole island, but at least do that. And then what you would have is you'd have someone come out, a subject matter expert from the generator company, and will tell you, oh, you need this amp a generator or that amp a generator, or there's these whisper generators. If it's near a residential area, you pay a little bit more, but it's quieter. So you want to do that. And it's really a pretty simple thing to do. And what you're paying for is you're paying for them to come and place generators when you call them. And then you're also paying And based on the length of our blackouts, we probably wouldn't need this for refueling of those generators if needed. But those are the two items you would want in a contract with a generator company, and that would solve a lot of the difficulties that we're having with these power outages. And having worked on former military bases, I know that the plan here is not according to industry specs, so it's actually kind of dangerous for the workers who are working on it, because a lot of communication, electrical is commingled inappropriately according to industry standards. So I understand why sometimes repairs are slow, because they're working in an environment where you can't safely rush. So thank you.
Thank you, John. All right. Okay, seeing no other people who want to.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Belina. Just referencing back to what Barclay had said, he did create a website at treasureislandsfpoweroutages.com, just for reference.
Thank you. All right. Okay, next item, please.
Item number 3, report by Treasure Island Director.
Thank you, Chair Tsen, members of the board. I wanted to start tonight by thanking Chantal Lewis for her work hosting the Halloween celebration this month, and to invite her to come up and say a few words about the YMCA's programs.
Hello. First, thank you for having me. The Halloween turnout was actually a really, really good turnout. I think we probably had about 150 people that signed in, and that we did not capture everyone that came in, so it was a great event to be at. As Bob said, Chantal Lewis, the director for the YMCA of San Francisco, this gym right here specifically. Thank you for allowing me time to update everyone on all the things that we're doing here for the community. I'm going to provide you an update on 3 specific program areas. We have updates within the categories of our youth programs, our health and wellness sector, as well as community engagement. Starting with health and wellness, we've made a lot of changes in the gym since last year, or at the start of the fiscal year in July. We've expanded the fitness floor. You might not be able to tell 100% right now because of the setup, but we've put our cardio equipment from inside the 2 rooms behind us onto the floor to have more of a fuller feel in this massive gym. With the expansion of the fitness equipment coming out here, it allowed us to provide new machines, equipment for the community. We've added in some new cardio equipment, some new ab machines, some box equipment, as well as some strength equipment and some stretching machines for the community. We've updated our fitness area behind the walls to divide it into 2 sections. We now have a free weight area, and then we have an area specifically focusing on our strength machines for different parts of the body. We plan to add in some new machines as well. Additionally, we've taken feedback from the community to see what other things they would like to see to make sure we keep in line with their health and wellness goals. For community engagement, we opened up an additional studio down the back hallway where we offer fitness classes. We now have 4 group exercise classes here. We have a yoga class where we just hired a new teacher that starts on December 3rd. We have a Zumba class that happens on Saturdays. We have a body combat class that happens twice a week on Thursdays and Saturdays, and we have a hip hop class as well. One of the most exciting additions that we made, as well as a community room that's right behind us. In the community room, we designed it for guests that are done with their workouts and just need a place to relax. We have some tables set up in there for different interactive activities, whether they want to work on a computer, sit down. We're hoping to get a vending machine in there, or just want a place to be outside of the house into the facility. So please check that out if you get a chance. We are also working on a website for the YMCA specifically, so residents are more informed of our hours of operations. We are offering classes, cancellations, as well as a membership newsletter. We've also started a scanning system for this facility specifically to ensure that we are capturing who comes in the building, and with the growth of our youth programs, we want to make sure we're keeping everyone safe within our facility. And so lastly, I'm going to talk about the youth programs. So over the summer, we had the opportunity to have 52 youth participate in our free summer camp for 10 weeks. That's where we took the kids. 52 didn't show up every day, but we fluctuated the number. But we were able to take the kids off-site to our Embarcadero YM location where they participated in the swim, group activities, and just saw a bunch of the Bay Area. We started our partnership with Life Learning Academy, and we offer 4 days of PE programming in the facility, and we're also working to do evening classes for the youth that live on the island in the new housing setup. We offer 6 levels of swim lessons, so entry to getting comfortable with water to all the way up to knowing how to do the proper strokes. And that's open. Last year we just did it on one day, which was Saturday, and now we do Saturday and Sunday, so we open that up to the community as well. We currently have 15 youth enrolled in we currently have about 20 kids enrolled in our programming, averaging about 14 youth a day in our programs every day. And we are taking registration, so if you have youth, please send them our way. And then lastly, we are currently offering camps for Thanksgiving and winter break. We have a free 3-day camp for Thanksgiving for any youth on the island between ages TK to 8th grade, as well as 2-week winter break camp when school is out in December with no camp on Christmas or New Year's. 100% free to the community, so please get the kids in here. And as we gear up for the holidays, we'll be offering a turkey drive for turkey boxes, so full dinner boxes for all the youth that are in our programs, so they'll have food for Thanksgiving, as well as bike giveaways. We have a few more things coming up, but I guess I should say some announcements for the next time we all meet. But lastly, if you are able to attend, we have a District 6 Summit at Gene Friend Park on Saturday, the 23rd of this month from 1 to 3, and that's where DCYF wants families to come and have their voices be heard on the things that they want to see happen for our community. Other than that, that's the updates for the YMCA.
That's great. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you so much for that report. You know, the Y is such an important part of this community, and so we're very grateful for all that you and your staff do. And thank you for allowing us to have our meeting in your facility tonight. Thank you.
Also, Travis Lunn from the Treasure Island Sailing Center was going to give an update on their programs as well.
President Zen, Supervisor Haney, directors of the board, Director Beck, good evening. My name is Travis Lund, and I am the Executive Director of the Treasure Island Sailing Center. I'm here today to highlight the progress our program has made in 2019. We appreciate the support the board and the supervisor have shown, and I especially want to thank Director Richardson for attending the launch of the Siebel Sailors program last month, and Supervisor Lai for bringing her son to the sailing camp this summer. We also want to thank the residents of the island who participated in our programs. We had 28 island residents attend 34 sailing classes this year. In 2019, our program's instruction increased by 25% to over 40,000 hours while serving 17% more people. Overall, TIS filled 3,420 class spaces with over 3,100 unique individuals. This represents a 300% increase in participation since 2013. Our partnership with NOAA, 11th Hour Racing, and the St. Francis Sailing Foundation helped to launch our newest program, Sailing to Save the Sea, a 5-day program which teaches San Francisco Public School 5th graders about the Bay Area watershed and how and why we need to protect it. This program, along with our 1-day STEM program, Set Sail Learn, for SFUSD 4th graders, now brings over 1,500 kids to TISC each year, exposing them to sailing while supporting next-generation science standards being taught in schools. TISC has reached over 8,000 kids with these STEM programs since 2013. Most recently, TISC was selected by U.S. Sailing as the first center in the country and primary hub in the Bay Area to take part in the Siebel Sailors program. With a $3 million gift from Tom and Stacy Siebel, U.S. Sailing will help expand access to the sport of sailing by providing both equipment and coaching to 5 regions across the country. The program targets historically marginalized communities and has placed 24 new boats, a coach boat, and a full-time expert coach in the Bay Area alone. With negotiations of our lease behind us, TIS leadership is looking forward to the future. While we continue to make progress, like becoming a U.S. sailing team training facility, we understand the challenges ahead. As we enter this new phase, we're beginning to form our strategies for capital improvements and long-term growth. From all of our participants, volunteers, staff, and our board of directors, we thank you for your continued support of the Treasure Island Sailing Center. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you very much.
Before the meeting began, some of you may have had the opportunity to stop by the Census 2020 table in the back of the room, but I wanted to invite Katerina Hartigan to say a few words about the census next year.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me, but really, I want to talk to these people.
That's right.
We have a lot of jobs at the census. We have enumerator positions, so please come and talk to us. The jobs start at $30 an hour, part-time. You can work with your schedule. We have something for everybody. So please come see us at the back, and we'll like to partner with everybody here on the island. This is one of the islands, one of the census tracts that is hard to count. So we want your support this time to we all be counted. We know that we use these resources. I was talking with the Department of Emergency Management. I'm a former FEMA employee, and we use census data all the time. Let's just say we do have an emergency here. We need to figure out how many people live here so that we can account for them, and also to make sure we have resources for people in evacuation shelters. So please come talk to us, and if you would like us to come and speak with you at any time, please come and support us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This Saturday, there will also be 2 events on the island at the Ship Shape. First, the Indigenous Permaculture Group that runs our community garden will be hosting a workshop from 9 to noon. And from noon to 2, there will be a native plant garden installation at the TI gym with the San Francisco Department of Environment, TIDA staff, and Rubicon. But I'd like to invite Guillermo from Indigenous Permaculture to say a few words about the community garden and this Saturday's event.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the space and the moment to express myself. And thank you to the public. Thank you so much for those that support the garden and coming to work Saturdays. We have this coming weekend event, and we're going to do like all the way to medicine, but apple cider vinegar and some different kind of crops that we used a long time ago, 1940, 1950, 1920s. Why we do this is because we're trying to empower the community through education and also by the garden to share all the information, knowledge that we carry ourselves with our family, with our community, to empower them to be nutritional and also be healthy. So thank you so much for supporting the garden, and all the beauty that you're going to see in the photos eventually is by what you're doing. Also for the community, it is important to recognize those that come to work on the weekend with me, and also not only the site, but the elements surrounded by the island. It's water, sun, all these things, tasty, and the crops. I invite you to come to see the garden and feel the sweetness of the Mother Earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
As was discussed during public comment, this past week we did have a power outage affecting our power supply from Oakland. That was further complicated Saturday morning when we had some problems with one of the 2 generators that was powering the island. I know these outages, there's been an increase in these outages this year, and it's a source of frustration for many of the residents. But I did want to acknowledge the efforts of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to restore the power this weekend, and also the Department of Emergency Management, who we'll be hearing from on the regular agenda, The city did activate its incident management team structure, and there were a lot of resources brought to bear to restore power as quickly as was possible. And I'd like to invite Barbara Hale, Deputy General Manager for the PUC, to come up and say a few words.
Good evening, Barbara Hale, Assistant General Manager for Power at the San Francisco PUC. Partnering with your Executive Officer, Bob Beck, and team, and the Department of Emergency Management, we did manage to get power back on. If it would be helpful, I'm happy to kind of run through circumstances and then answer any questions you may have. So just for context, as you know, TIDA owns the facilities, sets the rates, and the PUC is responsible for, like a contractor would be, for performing operations and maintenance. We first experienced an outage here on the island on Tuesday afternoon. Our teams, our electrical workers at the PUC began troubleshooting to identify what went wrong. Both islands, TI and YBI, were out. The troubleshooting, therefore, focused on the Oakland side. Just to remind you, there's a switchgear that was referred to by one of your public commenters on the island that distributes through overhead and underground facilities throughout the island the electricity. The electricity arrives at that switchgear from an underwater cable that connects to land just below the footing of the Bay Bridge. From the Bay Bridge, there's a line that proceeds underground back to a Port of Oakland substation. That's where the electricity we have delivered here is picked up. You know, upstream of that, the Port of Oakland has a line that connects to PG&E's substation. So our troubleshooting focused on the line from Land's End to the Port of Oakland. We followed protocol, identified the fact that power would be out on the island for more than 6 hours. That, per prior arrangements and agreements with TIDA, is when we activate the 2 generators, one that's on Treasure Island and one that's on Yerba Buena Island. We activated the generators on Wednesday afternoon. We encountered a fuel problem. The city fuel vendor could not commit to timely fuel deliveries to keep the generators continuously operating. We didn't see a problem with the fuel consumption rate at the Yerba Buena generator, but we did at the Treasure Island generator, so we made the determination it would be smart to conserve fuel to take that generator offline from midnight until 5 a.m. The generator then on Friday, so the islands both continued to operate until we encountered that fuel problem. We solved that fuel problem and continued to work on the source of the grid problem, the Land's End to the Port of Oakland substation line. And on Friday, we located the source of the outage on that line. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the generator failed on Treasure Island. So we had a fuel problem that interrupted service. We had a generator then, just the one on Treasure Island, that failed. We don't have grid power. We're just operating on generators, so when that generator failed, we had to problem solve for how to bring Treasure Island back up without a generator and without grid power. We, around noon, were able to restore power on Treasure Island by backfeeding from the Yerba Buena generator just to residential customers. and we switched the service then to residential customers on Treasure Island from the Yerba Buena generator. We also identified the Job Corps dorms as a critical customer that was not able to be served through that backfeeding arrangement, so we brought in additional PUC crews to put an independent generator to power the life safety systems in the dorms. So at this point, we have a situation where we have a generator that's failed, we have a grid failure as well, and we called in additional resources to help us so we could tag team both those problems. So we received additional assistance from the crews, the PUC crews that are typically stationed up at Hetch Hetchy, as well as Modesto Irrigation District electrical line workers who came and helped us restore power on the grid. So ultimately, the grid power was restored on Sunday afternoon around 1:30, 1:45. The generator that failed on Treasure Island is, work continues to be in progress to restore that capability. We don't need to use it right now because we have grid power, but we do want that generator repaired. The cause of the outage, it turns out, was a dig-in on that underground cable from the Port of Oakland substation to Land's End. This is the line that runs roughly adjacent to the approach to the Bay Bridge on the Oakland side. We have yet to have our after-incident conversations with TIDA and with the Department of Emergency Management, but we will have those after-incident conversations to identify how we can improve when we face circumstances like this again. It's a typical practice after an emergency for us to pause, take a look at the circumstances, sort of document the timeline and understand exactly what happened, and then identify where we can do a better job. Clearly, the challenges we experienced with fuel, which turns out was really not the fuel itself that was unavailable to us, it was the truck to bring the fuel to us that was unavailable to us. That's a problem that we as a city should be able to solve fairly expeditiously. So there should be some low-hanging fruit solutions. I think the lessons learned opportunities here will become clear once we've had an opportunity to sit down with the Department of Emergency Management and with your own TIDA staff to see how we can perform better. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes. Mr. Haney.
Thank you. Thank you for having this item on here. I think, the first thing is just to say that I hope we all agree that it's completely unacceptable for people who live on the island, work on the island, own businesses on the island to have to continuously deal with this situation of these outages. And it's concerning to me that considering how many times that this has happened, that we haven't figured out a more immediate, sustainable way to ensure that there's backup power immediately available. And it seemed to me like there's some things here. And let me just say also, just for the residents here before I forget, that there were a lot of people who contacted my office, and you were always able to do that, as well as I'm sure TIDA and others. For folks who had damage related to the outage, you can file a claim with the city attorney's office at sfcityattorney.org/claims, or you can come and drop them through my office. I know there was a lot of concerns about what occurred and an impact on people on the island. In terms of how this works with the generators, there seems to be a number of things here that don't make a lot of sense to me. One is, why does it take so long to activate the generators to begin with once the power goes out or the grid breaks down? It sounds like it was 6 hours. That seems to me like a long amount of time to wait. Why don't we do it sooner? I'm going to ask a few questions about the generators first, and then secondly, this issue of the backup fuel. Is there backup fuel available? It just seems to me that It's just incredible that in a city as wealthy as ours, in an island that continues to have this problem, that we wouldn't have backup fuel right there available, and that we couldn't get a truck to bring fuel. It just, I think understandably from people on the island feels like they're not being treated fairly and being treated as second-class citizens in their own city. The other piece of this is that once the generator ran out of fuel, it sounds like the YBI generator sort of could provide power for the Treasure Island, and actually sort of you shifted to that. Why didn't we do that earlier? And just as a general thing about the generators, the point was made about other options like battery powers and other sorts of things. If our backup power is so unreliable, it seems like we have first and foremost to make sure that obviously we fix the grid, but in the meantime that we have a reliable source of backup power that's there with the adequate amount of fuel, and maybe we need 2 generators on Treasure Island. It just seems hard to believe that our backup source could also go down in light of how many times this has happened.
Ready?
I got a few more, but that's about the generators.
Okay, I'll try to take each of these in turn. So why 6 hours for the generators? That's certainly something that TIDA and the PUC can revisit. We do have the standard practice. It takes us about an hour to get the generators up and running, and then about an hour to switch back to grid power after the grid is restored. So an outage that's going to last something more than a couple of hours is eligible for eligible for us to switch to the generators. It definitely takes additional crew for us to both troubleshoot the problem and set the generators up. So those are just complexities that, when we addressed this question last, PUC and TIDA resolved that a 6-hour window was the appropriate window for, if we anticipated an outage would be longer than 6 hours, we would start the generators. That doesn't mean we're waiting 6 hours to begin the process. That just means that once we figure out the situation is bad enough that we don't think we'll be able to restore power within 6 hours, we start them up. So we could start them in less time. It's just we need time to make that judgment call. With respect to backup fuel, the city does have a fuel truck. The fire department has a fuel truck that we would normally be able to call upon. It was not available. The vendors themselves, who are responsible for providing us with this service, could not commit. So it's sort of like a domino of a series of unfortunate circumstances that led to us not having, we had the generator, we didn't have, and we had a fuel plan with the vendor, but the vendor says no. Well, so sort of plan B is to go to using one of our own trucks within the city fleet that the fire department has. That one's also unavailable. So I guess we had to have a plan C, and we didn't. So the possible solutions there are for us to procure an additional fuel truck. And so that's one of the considerations that we'll be discussing as we talk about after incident, cures, what could we do differently, what could we do better. Your next question was about the back feeding from YBI and why we didn't perform that earlier. So there was a window of time there where we spent time from an engineering perspective looking at what could be done. We were trying to we needed to establish whether YBI generator could carry the load of Treasure Island as well as Yerba Buena Island. We established it could not. Then we looked at whether we could restore portions of the island, and that is the step we took. We restored we prioritized residential customer restoration, and those were the areas of the island that were restored. So that was really just a series of, sort of working through the problem. With respect to backup battery power, we have looked at that concept before. I think it was referred to as the Puerto Rico idea. We had performed some work. Our engineering staff had performed some work on that possibility before and evaluated it. Most of the problems on Treasure Island are distribution system problems, not supply problems. Backup generation of a battery pack style would not solve for that. And it would be a supplemental power source that would take quite a bit of space and expense. That's certainly something that can be revisited, as I say, as we learn from these incidents. We question, again, what are the appropriate steps for us to take? We can revisit that, but in our last look at that option, it was deemed to be insufficient to solve for the kinds of circumstances we typically experience on Treasure Island. Most of the outages on Treasure Island are distribution system outages on the system here on Treasure Island or on the system on Yerba Buena Island. No amount of battery backup could solve for a dig-in kind of problem like we experienced this time. And that was frankly on new equipment. So couldn't have anticipated or protected against that. The systems that are designed to protect against that are requiring people who dig to to notify us, to have a USA come out and mark the locations. If they have a dig-in, notwithstanding that, they're supposed to report that. We received no such reports. So, sort of the fail-safes did not operate as they are supposed to on the dig-in situation that we experienced this time.
Thank you. So it does sound like there are some changes that we might be able to make either on making sure that the generator is activated sooner and that there's another backup source of fuel that's more likely to be available. I think those things would be very important to do in the future as you assess what didn't work here. The transmission cable issue was identified on Tuesday, and when were the crews dispatched to make the repairs?
The repairs so the first step we needed to do was make sure we had the proper equipment and supplies to perform the repairs. We obtained the appropriate cable and connectors and everything on Friday afternoon. Repairs on the cable started on Saturday.
And there was mutual aid that was requested?
Yes, and we requested mutual aid so that we could do more than one task at a time, right? So that we could look to repair the generator as well as repair the grid power, so that we could accelerate the pace at which the grid power improvements would be completed.
And so there was mutual aid requested and an emergency declaration Friday and Saturday?
Mr. Beck can respond to the emergency declaration aspects. That was performed by TIDA.
If for the mutual aid or the emergency declaration, would that have allowed us to do something that we weren't able to do earlier on? Or why did it take so long to make those two declarations, or mutual aid and emergency declaration? If we would have done that earlier, would we be able to have dealt with some of these barriers earlier or get assistance quicker?
So we started to reach out for assistance not through the mutual aid approach, so those wheels started turning before the declaration was made and the formal mutual aid request went out. So we had already arranged with we had already been talking with Modesto Irrigation District to come to our assistance, and we'd already arranged for the supplies through informal mutual assistance before formally requesting it on Saturday. But I can't speak to Bob, if you could.
As far as the emergency declaration goes, in consultation with the Department of Emergency Management and others, we we made that declaration on Saturday morning to expand the contractual options that are available to both TIDA and the PUC. As it turns out, all of the contracting measures that were used to respond to this were already at our disposal, but it was thought, as we were continuing to explore a number of alternate paths on Saturday morning, that it was expedient to declare the emergency so that if we needed to exercise other alternatives, we could.
Last question I want to ask, because I'm sure other people have questions. Thanks for your patience with me. What is the plan between now and the new power grid to protect residents and businesses from power outages? In particular, I know you have a lot of experience with this. Are there components that could be installed now before a total grid makeover that would help residents and businesses immediately?
So we can certainly look again at, and again, this is part of what we'll talk about in the after incident setting and with the PUC and TIDA staff together, as we have in the past, look at what additional investments could be made that are prudent to minimize outages between now and when island improvements are completed. Certainly the new switchgear that will be installed that picks up the cable from underwater and transitions to the distribution network here, that new switchgear will be an improvement that is scheduled today to be online in December of 2020. So that, that's the calendar and the target date for that improvement. Whether there are additional things we can do to the existing systems in advance of wholesale improvement of those systems, we'll take another look at that. We did have a round of improvements that we made after the last spate of outages, and we can have another one of those sort of brainstorming roundtable conversations with the engineers, looking again at the development schedule and seeing where there might be appropriate near-term improvements that can be made.
Can we install the switchgear sooner than by December 2020?
I'll take that answer. We need to geotechnically improve the site where the switchgear is going to be located, and that work has begun. So we've already begun what is 15 months worth of construction to install the new switchgear. I also wanted to add, just in terms of contingency plans, following the outage that we had on President's Day weekend, which was an extended outage of about 13 hours, we do have a contingency plan for connecting an emergency generator to this facility as a location if there was, as Mrs. Hale mentioned, the more typical outage is a failure of the distribution network on the island where our main generators cannot bring the island back up. But to be able to bring a portable generator to power up this facility, so at least there would be a center on the island where people could come and charge phones or other devices in the event of an extended failure of the distribution system on the island.
So just last thing, which is that 15 months of construction sounds like a long time for me. I don't know if there's a way to expedite the switch gear. That seems like a long time. And then also on the charging stations, just if there's maybe some sort of standardized policy around that, of sort of after how long we're able to put the charging stations into place and where they are, et cetera. It sounds like after 10 plus hours of the outage that there wasn't a charging station yet put up. So I think the charging station is very important, but that was some feedback I also received.
We actually did activate that for Saturday morning here, but by early Saturday afternoon, the residential neighborhood was back up online, and so we demobilized that from here, and we took it over to the Job Corps Center so that the kids there could charge their facilities.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Haney. Mr. Dunlop.
Thank you very much. And, I appreciate your time and obvious consideration that's gone into this. I am a resident here, and I can tell you it was extremely frustrating, and the on and off aspect of it. And initially, in my calls to 311, or actually when I call 311, I get Oakland still, and I don't know, they can't really help me over there. But the people that I did get in San Francisco, there seemed to be a bit of confusion. And, you know, I just really felt that myself and my neighbors needed a little better direction, if possible, and especially about the timing, because it seemed like there were many different times that, oh, it's going to be ready at this time, or it's just going to be out for an hour, and then it went out longer. There's, you know, just numerous on and offs, and it was just, boy, it was rough. And, you know, for me, it was rough. Imagine somebody with small children and all of those things. So I've lived here for 10 years. This is, at least from my experience, the worst that we have had. And it was just, you know, all the neighbors were frustrated, angry. And although I know that there were constant notices put out, some of them didn't seem as accurate. So I think as in the future, you might look at maybe trying to notify quickly, and then the next notification having real-time information, and like, this is going to be out so long. So it's just not kind of a guessing game. And so we can feel a little more confident within the system. And, you know, it clearly just isn't working. I'm not an expert on this, and I don't know exactly when the new power grid's going to be on at some beautiful day in the future. But in the meantime, just, you know, I know the staff is concerned. I mean, they work on the island, practically live on the island sometimes. And obviously I know the board is very concerned, and certainly by the amount of people that are here. I mean, we've just got to do something, and something, as the supervisor mentioned, something permanent and something sustainable. This is not working. This is, if any other part of the city had this issue, I'm sure it would be fixed a lot sooner. We're in a unique situation, and so I think we just need some unique ideas, like bringing up the Tesla idea, although I guess you've looked at it and might not be appropriate, but there really has to be something so we can, you know, live our lives like regular San Franciscans. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Ms. Richardson.
Thank you very much, Barbour. And we know that your agency, including you, actually, folks were working around the clock to try to fix this, is, yes, one of the worst outages we've ever had. But I think we need to kind of go back here to see the fundamental issues. Treasure Island is not fully an integrated part of San Francisco. We inherited this. You mentioned the distribution infrastructure that caused this. The source was in Oakland, at the Port of Oakland. Someone was digging there. My first question, what would the response today? Has anyone at the Port of, do we have any kind of service level, MOU or agreement when this thing happened? Someone digging there? It is something that, because the burden, it's on the Oakland side. That's my first statement. What happened is that you look, over the years, we've had almost 150, as one of the residents mentioned before. So we sort of have some patterns here, little here and little there and little there. And we know that in the development of Treasure Island that addressing this is there, but we're not there yet. And so we have a man-made outage that happened. It could also happen, there's an earthquake or somewhere, and you're dealing with all this underground, cable that they are going to be obsolete anyway because we're looking at the, other types of distribution systems. You have this switch. So my question, we know in third world countries, power outages are a common occurrence. So here, portable generators, there are all kinds of in the market. And again, I'm looking here, we have seniors, we have young people or whatever, and it might be the time now to be even looking because even in the San Francisco mainland, as we know, the North Bay and all of them, when they have all these power outages and fires or whatever, and the energy were cut off. So at some point, what we've experienced here is going to happen somewhere, even in the mainland San Francisco. Isn't it time then now to make us a pilot whereby when this thing happened, someone mentioned having a central generator. What happened is that to charge your phone, you're still not going to be able to charge your, your refrigerator and all of that, your food. So can we now maybe look a little bit differently to, because this area is not really a part of San Francisco yet, and our energy needs are going to be different even when we build it out, to have a backup system that people can activate themselves for a few hours or whatever. I think it's going to cost less when you look at the kind of catastrophe here, and now people talking about lawsuit and all this other. It's just something to look at. That maybe we can have people here self-assured that they can have something until we can figure out what is going on. And again, should someone is digging in Oakland, they're going to continue digging, even in San Francisco, or the underground cable falls again, it will happen. It's an old technology and system is going to happen. So then we can have our own guaranteed backup system. So again, thank you again for your leadership there, because we know that, yes, everything looked kind of bad, but your agency was right and trying to do something, but we do need a solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Ms. Sly?
Thank you. Just quick few terminology clarifications. What is USA?
Utility Service Alert. This is a system where anyone who's going to dig knows they are supposed to call into this system to have a notification then go out to owners of infrastructure that's underground. And all of those owners of infrastructure underground have to come out and mark where their infrastructure is. So this is the standard protocol where wherever you dig, okay. This is the standard protocol.
And when you say that the cable, the grid problem was a dig-in problem, do you mean that there was damage to the cable done during some sort of digging activity?
Correct.
Okay. And is that done by the Port of Oakland or PGE?
So we are looking into who requested the USA markings, so we can go back to them and find out who actually was on site and performed the digging.
Okay.
And so that's part of our investigation that's underway now. Okay. I don't have answers for you, but we are looking into that.
Great. And then second part of my question is, can you talk a little bit more about the distribution versus the supply question? Because, I'm a layperson, and when I hear this, the way I understood it was that you're basically saying the Treasure Island's energy issue or utility issue is a distribution problem, meaning there's energy somewhere that's being pumped into the system, but it just cannot get to all the residents that need it.
You completely understand it. That's
okay.
Exactly what I'm saying.
But then you also said that using backup energy sources like battery packs there's not going to be enough batteries to help the distribution problem. So here's where the disconnect happens for me. I mean, wouldn't it make sense that if you located the backup sources, whether it's battery pack or, as Linda said, some sort of portable system closer to all the receivers, the residents, then wouldn't you solve your distribution problem?
So you could, if you had that backup supply at each residential unit or at each customer account. That's the only way that you would fail-safe say, we know the power won't go out, is that if the grid power went out and everyone had an individual generator at their location, and those generators were connected in a way that automatically transferred from grid to customer generator, if that was an automatic process, you would have a more seamless system. The Puerto Rico example is not that. And what I'm hearing in terms of some of the questions, both from yourself and from Ms. Richardson, is, is there something between the big generators, the two big generators we have today, and more distributed generators, be they renewable sourced or fossil fueled sourced, distributed around the island? Could that be a solution? And we can certainly, together with TIDA, we can certainly look at that. I don't have a good sense as I stand here today what the cost to TIDA would be of that, but that would come at some cost, and we can put that on the list of things to discuss as we look at, in the after incident situation, what we can do.
Great. So thank you for that response. That really clears things up for me. It sounds like there are potentially technical solutions. We just have to evaluate whether or not they're worthwhile to do. And it sounds like there will be some sort of a postmortem discussion around what happened. And that's very much appreciated. And there's a lot of learning to do there. I also just want to say that it sounds like TIDA and PUC has tried to do the right thing in the past when this has happened before by evaluating the situation and also coming up with a backup plan. And unfortunately, in this case, it seems like there are multiple failures in the chain of command, I guess, in the backup plan. I would just encourage you to, in this next phase of evaluation, to consider whether or not the distribution of resources is allocated in the correct way, because it sounds like there's one generator on Treasure Island and one on YBI, but the occupancy is clearly much more heavier on TI side. So, maybe just think about that. To your earlier point about thinking about more interim sources that would provide basically a distributed source instead of a central source and then trying to distribute it, sounds like a good thing to explore. Obviously, it sounds like it could be very costly, and that's something that the city and TIDA will have to consider. And then that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lai. Mr. Kwan, did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. AGM Hale, hello.
Hello.
First, kudos for bringing in Hetch and Modesto Irrigation. You're reaching out far to get them to help, so really kudos for bringing about that solution. I also want to affirm your general approach. The infrastructure is so fragile here that I know that the PUC, there are a lot of newer technologies out there that could be experimented upon, but I want to recognize the PUC's wisdom in not going in that route, because those experiments could lead to more catastrophic failures. So stay on that track. At Cal Academy, we're familiar with the difficulties that can occur to get diesel for your backup generators. We have 40,000 live animals to keep alive when the power goes out. I just want to affirm too, you're looking for sourcing an additional fuel truck. That two are not available is a catastrophe. It is Murphy's Law, but that third option makes a lot of sense. But the previous director's question about who did the dig-in, I have a question, maybe this might be more appropriate for Bob or AGM Hale. What disincentives are there for people who don't comply with regulations in filing a request to dig? Is there a fine involved? silly mistakes like someone who does that kind of digging, and I don't know the full story, so I shouldn't say silly, but that has obviously a broad impact. And I just want to leave it out there as an action item to hear more about what the repercussions are for someone who causes this type of incident.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Schifrin?
I was just going to actually say the same thing as, it sounds like you guys are still doing the investigation, but it sounds like the failure to comply, and since they didn't do the USA, it'll be interesting to see how you find out, who was doing the digging, but.
Just to clarify on that point, we did get a USA request. We did mark the sites. That much we're sure
You guys
of.
did the marking, but then whoever did the digging didn't follow?
That's the part that we're still investigating is, did the permittee, the person who got the permit and the USA work done, is that the entity? Did they come out? I don't know that. Did they have a subcontractor come out? I don't know that. There were multiple locations that were dug in, so we need to investigate all the circumstances around that. But,
Got it.
But we do know that a contractor asked for USA markings, and those markings occurred.
Okay. And so then just so I understand kind of different scenarios, if there was some failure on their part to comply and they did make an error, are they financially liable in any way, and could we use that money for solutions here on the island?
Yes, and we're working with the city attorney on that very question.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, very quick.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask real quickly just about people who have had losses, and I know the supervisor mentioned that, but then the restaurants and all the other businesses that operate on the island, is there a fast, easy process for both residents and the businesses?
Yeah, so I would just echo what the supervisor said, what Supervisor Haney talked about. The contacting the city attorney's office is the appropriate step. And I don't know how long the process takes, I have to admit, but we can look into that and report back on it.
Okay, last comment from the board, Mr. Haney.
Sorry, just realized there was a few other small things. In the residential power up, was Life Learning Academy included in that?
I don't know.
Okay, that's one thing too.
We checked with the Life Learning Academy, and although they now have a dormitory facility, all of their students were home for the weekend.
Oh, okay.
So they did not have any students on the island, so we did not prioritize that at the same level as Job Corps and some other restoration.
Thank you for checking on that. I also had some folks let me know that they thought they saw that there were that the power outages have an impact on the sewer system, or at least there was a perception of that. Are those two things connected at all?
The wastewater treatment plant has its own generator. Power supply was interrupted to some of the sewage pump stations. In that event, the PUC has what is called a Vector truck located here on the island, and they're able to go individually to those pump stations and collect the sewage as it builds up within the wet well of the pump station. When the residential neighborhood came back online, power was also restored to all of the pump stations within the residential neighborhood. So there were no sanitary sewer overflows or other problems related with the outages this past week.
Great, thank you.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Ms. Hale. And Mr. Beck, we will want to have another report when we have all of the information and you've had your post-mortem examination. We will want to certainly hear all of the answers. Thank you.
Happy to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Beck, to continue with your report, and I would urge us to speed it up a little.
Yeah, no, I have just a very few items and no more speakers. Last Tuesday, or I'm sorry, the Tuesday before last, on October 29th, Treasure Island Advisors, TIDA, and TICD staff held a workshop, Pathway to Homeownership workshop at the Shape, attracting 81 attendees. On October 30th, The cleanup site 24, which includes the former dry cleaning facility, was transferred from the Navy to TIDA. At this point, 70% of the base has been transferred to the city. On the 23rd and 24th of this month, the Treasure Fest, formerly the Treasure Island Flea, will be holding its last event on the island. The Treasure Fest will not continue in 2020 due to scheduling conflicts with utility work that is needed along the western shoreline, but may return in 2021. Also, for all of the residents on the island, wanted to remind everybody that next year we will be having 3 of these on-island board meetings, beginning in March, July, and then November of next year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Is there any public comment on the director's report? Any other board questions? If you have one, please come up and state your name.
Jim Morowski, a business owner, 12 years here on the island. Quick question for Ms. Hayes from the PUC. What was the basis of the decision to energize YBI when there's only a couple construction sites on the island for the developer? That's one. Why was that done initially? And the second thing is that my understanding is that the TI generator, backup generator, is relatively new. It's actually very young. And so I'd like to know from a report from the PUC, why did it fail on Saturday? And then finally, just as a comment from on behalf of a lot of business owners here, we're facing the power outages, construction, delays, people getting diverted, customers getting, basically thinking it's a zombie apocalypse out here sometimes. And at the same time, TIDA is raising the commercial rates. And that's a comment and a question that I have for you that I'll take up later on, but that's a comment for all of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick points of fact. Like I said, I work for a utility company. I've been involved in many dig-ups and repairs of utility lines. And typically, about 80% of the time, the fault is of the contractor who did not call in. When a contractor calls in for a marking of the utility lines, it's rather rare for them to actually hit something. It's more common over a large extended area like this work apparently was. And it is, what can happen is actually there can be an error in the person who makes the markings, because typically a utility worker will know their area and they'll know where the stuff is even without doing certain types of locating things, tricks of the trade. But if it's something like the path of a former military, I don't know who's owned this in the past, and it's outside the city limits, the chance of a mistake are much, much higher, and the PUC should not be investigating whether the PUC was the cause of this dig-up, because that is the distinct possibility based on my experience and the description of the problem. The other thing, it was not correct when the person said that because the problems with the distribution facility, which is like the final mile out to the residences, that we can't have the Tesla solution. That's not true. The Tesla solution actually is designed for that, because this would go on an individual building, either an apartment building or a business, and there's built-in mechanism where you don't have to wait 6 hours. It instantly switches over with a zero loss of service as soon as the AC power fails. And as far as the generator needing however many hours lead-up time, that is ridiculous. That's not standard industry practice. We've had technology for decades that lets you switch virtually instantly. So they either need a new generator vendor. Well, they definitely do based on the fuel shenanigans. And my final thing is, if they don't want to do the Tesla thing, they can at least subscribe to, like I said earlier, a spot generator service where they're teed up to bring generators to buildings and businesses as needed in a timely manner. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next. Yes.
Hi there. My name is Linda. I'm the owner of Araceli Cafe. We were out of power for 38 hours, and I just want to know if you foresee this happening often. We're losing, I mean, people are canceling parties in the future because of this outage.
Yes.
So that's my first question. Second question is there any way to get services like dry ice or, I mean, obviously the generators, but you know, battery powered lights. We could not get any information through 311. They just kept telling us, sorry, it's residents only. So,
yeah,
that's my question.
Oh, well, thank you.
Do you
It's very
do
frustrating.
you foresee this happening in the next year?
Yeah. You know, we are not, cannot answer questions, but we have noted your comments, and Mr. Beck will take that into consideration. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to make another comment on the cost. I actually made a website, the Treasure Island SF Power Outages, and that made the San Francisco PUC do a white paper of how the Tesla solution can work. Because initially I had asked property management if I personally can pay to come up with a solution, because I am privileged enough to have the money and the resources to do so. I got a quote from the electrician that provides essentially the repairs for the island, and I got a quote of $30,000 for me personally to pay to prep my apartment to install a Tesla Powerwall. Like, I have a quote. I just got it this last week because there was a lot of pressure on it from all the power outages, and it just goes to show that we can install Tesla Powerwalls, power packs, or mega packs. An example is Tesla in Australia installed the largest battery in the world to help solve their problem. So there is no scalability issue with the Tesla solution at all. And if we let Elon and their team know, I bet, just like they did in Puerto Rico and just like they did for the divers when they were stuck in the caves, that he would be like, this is a perfect marketing opportunity for them. They're going to solve a 20-year issue. It's something that can be solved. It's just, does TIDA want to spend the money to solve it, or does the government want to solve it? Because honestly, it feels, by the most recent census data, that 40% of all residents that live here make under $30,000 a year. And I'm not talking as Facebook, but I'm a Facebook employee. And I couldn't imagine if I lived in, like, to say, a tower downtown and the power went out consecutively like this, that these high privileged tech people like myself would have to deal with that. You guys wouldn't in an instant go to some tech bros and stuff like that are making $200,000 a year and say, hey, we're not going to spend the money to solve this problem by simply contacting Tesla at tesla.com/utilities to start that conversation. Because if you're not going to at least have that conversation and create a price around the solution, then I don't think we're doing enough for the residents.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So, seeing no other public comments, can we go to the next item?
Item number 4, communications from and received by TIDA.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none. Next item, please.
Item number 5, ongoing business by Board of Directors.
Any items by the board? Hearing none. Next item.
Item number 6, consent agenda. 6A, approving the minutes of the October 9th, 2019 meeting.
Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Next item, please.
Item number 7, TIMA report, recommended toll policy and affordability program for current residents.
Good. Hello, Rachel.
Hi,
Yeah.
good evening, Directors. Rachel Hyatt, San Francisco County Transportation Authority, and I'm here to give you an informational update on the content that we presented to the TIMA committee yesterday, and the recommendation that they put forward to the, are going to put forward to the TIMA board, which is meeting next Tuesday, the 19th. And do I, is this what I use? I'm sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. So the challenge, as everyone knows, is to manage the traffic that will be generated by the new development in a way that supports the sustainability goals of the island. And so there's a comprehensive multimodal transportation plan to do that. One of the elements is new regional transit services, so going beyond Muni into regional transit, and mechanisms to discourage driving, congestion toll, parking. All of those revenues will pay for the new regional transit, and there's performance targets we need to meet regarding the share of traffic that's on the bridge generated, the share of the Treasure Island traffic that goes onto the bridge generated by vehicles, and raising enough revenue to fulfill the transit service called for in the plan. We know that there are a number of remaining toll policy items that we need to work on, bring before you and our board that are undecided. We brought an action before our board yesterday that we're expecting as a series of multiple policy actions that will propose and that they'll take through the next 6 months or through spring 2020. So this was a first in what we're seeing as a series of actions. This one was specifically around the current residents. We know that we need to bring forward recommendations of supports for workers and businesses and the other commercial tenants at the island, as well as proposals to support future low-income households or folks who will be in the future below-market rate housing. Those we anticipate coming to you early next year, through spring 2020. We prioritize this topic based on the feedback we got through outreach and also the analysis we were able to do showing what it will take to make this happen. Based on this, we recommended, or this is actually the recommendation that the TIMA committee advanced through their yesterday meeting. So this will exempt current residents from the toll. There are a number of details about how exactly this works that still need to be figured out, and the mechanism to do that is toll system business rules that the TIMA committee and board will also need to adopt. So how exactly do people get this? It probably involves having a fast track transponder that you need to work with TIDA with us to get, and that would be an exempt transponder. We need to figure out how to reauthorize that for people as households change and people leave off the go off the island. What defines current resident? Those are matters we will bring back. Matters of definition. The other action that the committee took is to include revisiting this policy at the midpoint of development based on unit count, so 4,000 being the midpoint. There's other periods throughout the program that we will need to evaluate its performance overall and whether the program is meeting the objectives, and so this would be included in that evaluation. There is a resource need that it will take to make this happen and keep the rest of the transit services whole in terms of the revenue that they need, that's needed to pay for the transit. So we will work with our city partners, with regional partners, and also internally to the program revenues that are authorized to try to identify options for covering that resource gap. The next steps, actually the most immediate next step, is next Tuesday when the full TIMA board would meet and consider the final adoption of this policy. Then going forward for remaining areas of policy that aren't decided, we need to complete the outreach conversations with non-residential travelers and identify proposals there, identify and understand what it would take to do different supports for future residents in below market rate housing, and then bring back the rest of the undecided policy areas in the spring of 2020. That includes what's the amount of the toll, what are the hours of operation, and details about other supportive benefits that we need to provide, like the transit pass. So thank you, and please let me know your questions.
Okay. I think before I take board comments and questions, I would like to hear from the public first. So if there's any public comments, please come forward.
Hi there. Ben Sistos, Treasure Island resident. I was able to attend the meeting yesterday, and the planning department had some of the same slides. And there were a few more, including one that talked about the strategies and perks. Was slide 13 in yesterday's presentation, and included unbundling and paid parking. So is there a expected date when current Treasure Island residents will have to pay for the parking that we currently are getting for free?
Okay, we'll take that question into consideration, but we're not answering it at this point in time. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, thank you for this opportunity. My name is John Harrison, retired Lieutenant Commander, 24 years of active service in the Navy, half of which was spent on Treasure Island. During that period, as a ragman, a sailor, I taught 1,000 people to sail. I supported regattas from the civilian community, military community, even the disabled. I birthed my boat here. But let's look at the history of Treasure Island. When it was built in the 30s with public funds, there was nobody putting up a toll booth at the entrance or exit to the Bay Bridge. It would be a breach of trust to institute a new program to pick people's pockets. And that's what this is. They talk about a revenue to the transit assistance, but the fact is that money will go into the general fund, and only if allocated out by the Board of Supervisors will it go back. So once again, it's a shell game. They're just taking money. It's a burden that will strangle small businesses, the worker, the residents. Nobody needs it. There are people who berth their boats here. I'm one of them. If you're going to charge me $5, $6, $7, $10 to get on the island, to get off the island, I'm going to take my boat and all the experience and all the effort I continue to dedicate to this island to a marina that's more convenient to me, better maintained, and isn't picking my pocket. So I encourage you all to look with great skepticism towards an idea which is pie in the sky projections, things that are going to happen in 2025, 2030, that it's made up on a piece of paper. So I thank you for your attention and invite your skepticism.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes?
I'm sorry, I hate to keep yapping, but
Excuse me, your name again.
oh, my name is John Talbot, and I live on North Point. This toll, however, and by the way, when we had the presentation, there was a reevaluation in the center of that process that was proffered there, and that sounded like a chance to institute a toll where previously maybe it hadn't been. But any sort of toll is going to be another step in gentrifying this island. Our supervisor, his district includes those towers down there, and I went to a public meeting where they talked about the navigation center, and the amount of disdain from the people living in those towers for people like us was the level of narcissism and disdain was tremendous, and those are the people we share a district with. So there are people in the city who don't want people like us in this city, and this toll will be a mechanism for achieving that end goal.
Thank you. Next, please. Step up.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Klein,
And since August 1999, I've lived in a market rate 4-bedroom unit in the Villages at Treasure Island. I want to thank the TIDA board for hearing my comment. 5 years after TIMA was established, we seem to have more questions than answers about the congestion toll for Treasure Island and about the entire transportation demand management program, for that matter. One question that should have been asked early on, since the Treasure Island project is, to the best of my knowledge, the first use of congestion pricing and a TDM program to create a zone-based pricing system for an 8,000-unit housing development on an island with only one roadway on or off, have the Treasure Island Community Development, or TIMA, done any study to assess whether the TDM program will impact the financial viability of the project? And there's been no explanation of how this market-based pricing system will work when there are no alternate routes and alternative travel modes are severely constrained, and there is no effective market mechanism to provide needed public goods such as bridges and highways or public transit. On the other hand, my letter to the Board of Supervisors dated November 8th, 2018, I did ask, that's a year ago, I did ask why TIMA failed to do an environmental justice assessment, even though Treasure Island is a low-income minority community. By the way, an environmental justice report was done for the ramps project, so I'll ask again, why hasn't TIMA done an environmental justice assessment? And so I'm going to read a little bit from the National Academy of Sciences Research Report 860, in assessing environmental justice effects of toll implementation and rate charges, guidebook and toolbook. Tolling has become more prevalent as a funding mechanism as well as an operations strategy for transportation facilities. The result of the impact on low-income minority populations is unclear. As a result of Executive Order 12898, U.S. Department of Transportation Order 5610.2a, and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the U.S. Department of Transportation requires transportation agencies to take into consideration environmental justice in all transportation programs, policies, and activities. According to U.S. Government Accountability Office, highway projects receiving federal aid are generally subject to environmental review under the National Environmental Policy Act, with Federal Highway Agency serving as the federal lead agency for the review. So again, I'll ask, why hasn't TIMA, since TIMA gets at least half of its funding from the Department of Transportation in funding grants from the federal government, I'll ask again, why hasn't TIMA done an environmental justice assessment? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no others, I'll open it out now to comments and questions from the board. Oh, I didn't see you. Did you speak before? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, not on this subject. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Supervisor Haney. Just a quick one on the toll. Again, I was active in the toll debate, and a lot of you all know that. The one thing I want to just reemphasize is that it's important for you all that TIMA, SFCTA provide the community and the city and the county a financial model that all the toll discussions are going to be based upon, so everybody has full visibility to it. We were just provided with an updated report that showed that the build-out schedule for the island is going to be pushed out significantly, and therefore it's going to impact the toll. It's going to impact a lot of things that are going to be happening on the island, and particularly the congestion. So please, Rachel, Eric, we need a full financial model that we can all see and understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Hi, this is Steve Stallone with Treasure Island Wines. I was at the TIMA committee meeting yesterday, and one of the things that was discussed that Rachel did not talk about is this idea of revisiting the toll when they're midway through the build-out. It was brought up, and I'm sure Supervisor Haney remembers this as well, that it isn't just the the halfway, midway point of the units build out. That's of significance. If there isn't, if the transportation, the alternative transport modes are not functioning at that point, that is also a very important thing. I mean, what's the point of trying to disincentivize driving with the toll if there really aren't other alternatives available at that time?
Okay, thank you. Okay, last chance. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, I'll open it up to the board. Any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Supervisor Haney, I'll let you go
I went
first.
first before. You can go ahead.
No, Supervisor Haney, since you've been so much involved with this.
Working on this solution.
Well, so I chair the TIMA committee, so of course I was there yesterday. And this was something that, obviously folks on the island have been speaking out about, attending meetings about, organizing around, expressing concern and frankly flat out opposition to me and to many others. So I made it clear in my capacity as supervisor and as the chair of the TIMA committee that I would not accept any toll that was on current residents, period, and that had to be made clear right away. And I do appreciate the point about it being revisited. There was some conversation about a sunset. This isn't a sunset. It's just going to be a point at which it's going to be evaluated. And one of the things that's really important about that evaluation is whether the transportation is in place. And that will be a key piece of it. I will be long gone by then because the estimated midpoint of the development of which this would be evaluated is 2029. So I thought it was important that we gave that confidence to current residents, and there's still a lot that needs to be figured out, and I want to thank Rachel and the staff for putting that in place, because now we need to figure out how to build out the public transportation and the infrastructure, not with any sense that we're going to be relying on a toll on current residents. So that's what this does, but the conversation is not over. We clearly have to look at businesses and employees and future residents and all of that. That hasn't been decided yet. This is not the end of this, and Rachel mentioned that there's going to be another set of conversations, and we do really want to make sure that everybody's involved with that there's adequate outreach and notice and information and all of that. So I just want to be clear that the only thing that that the TIMA committee decided is that for current residents, they will not be included in any toll. That's all that's been decided. And so just we haven't decided what we're going to do yet with businesses or anything else. And that one of the most important things that we're going to be assessing is the build out of the public transportation infrastructure. And my commitment is to make sure that we get that funding and that it happens, and that it shouldn't be something that is on the backs of current residents when, for reasons that you all are full aware of, that I don't need to belabor again and again, that's not fair, it's inequitable, it's illogical, frankly, to do this right now. And there's a lot of things that we need to do and get right before we even think about something like this. So that's my commitment, and that's what we did. And I really want to thank the Transportation Authority and their staff for hearing that. And you can be confident for current residents that there will not be a toll. So just to be clear again, it doesn't sunset. What we said is that it will be evaluated at the midway point of the development, which means when there are at least 4,000 units that have been built, which right now is estimated at 10 years from now. So that's the policy, and it will be passed from the board next week. So did I state that exactly correctly?
Yes.
Yes. So it's not just for 6 years, it's when there are 4,000 units that have been built here, which right now, based on the development timeline, is 10 years from now, and at that point it will be evaluated, not sunset. And we'll make that clear in the way that that's written.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Haney. Yes. Mr. Dunlop.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have one of my large concerns, but apparently it's still in discussion, is the businesses on the island and what impact this might have or might not have. It's wonderful that we're going to hopefully have a ferry coming to the island, and so great transportation modes. But if the ferry's coming to an island that isn't particularly active because it's just not working, that would be a real mistake, because people don't want to drive to an island that they have to pay a toll for, and the workers will have difficulty if they're just, low-wage workers. There's a lot of questions, but apparently those are on the table, and so I have a lot of faith in our supervisor. So thank you.
Okay, all right.
And our staff.
Yeah, yes, please. Just a quick, I guess, kudos to the supervisor for doing this is phase one. We also need to make sure, and again, this is on Supervisor Haney. You mentioned about the build out of public transportation. I think that's the key. How's that going to roll out? We don't know that, but I can foresee that any bond measure on transportation in San Francisco, we need to be included. And I'm sure we have a capable supervisor, and the supervisors, they can figure that out. So I just want to put that.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Ms. Schifrin.
Just a quick question for Tima or maybe Supervisor Haney. Wondering if there's an interim transit plan, just given the fact that it is going to take a while for this stuff to come online. Is there something that's being paid by the developer or in part by TIDA that would do kind of private, hiring a company to do buses or ferries in the interim?
Yes. So the new transit services will start when there's the first new units on the island, but the entire plan will phase in. So the service won't be as frequent or as much service at that first year as it will be during build out. So there's many different transition points in the plan where we're called to increase transit service levels. Right now, our assumptions for the start of the ferry service, we're assuming a small ferry vessel. So not the 400 passenger vessel that we project will need at build out, but a 75, 100 passenger vessel. Likewise for AC Transit, or the East Bay bus service rather, we're looking at all options there, including smaller vehicles that maybe go on more on an on-demand type of service, so that we can be as cost effective with that service as possible, and trying to get the best service levels, even though the demand will be, a fraction of what it ultimately will be.
Yeah, and I haven't done my homework and read those plans? Like, do those exist, or is that still in development?
Well, so the TITIP, the 2011 TITIP laid out a projected phasing. And so, we've always started with that, but created multiple different, scenarios, variations on that original TITIP phasing. And I think there have been previous presentations to the board about the ferry service and how that might phase in, and we can share with you that past information that we continue to work on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, all right. Any others? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Rachel, for your report. Yeah. Okay.
Item number 8, transition housing update.
Thank you, members of the board. I'll give you a quick update. At the last on-island board meeting, there was a lot of public comment post-DDA residents concerned about the timelines for development and the transition housing benefits that would be available under the adopted transition plans. Just to clarify for people, there have been some discussions tonight about the timelines. For development, we don't expect any of the existing housing to need to be vacated prior to 2024. And we don't anticipate that any existing residents would be required to permanently vacate the island for more than a decade. So There's quite a bit of time here where post-EDA residents would continue to be able to live on the island. But just kind of a quick recap of housing benefits that were originally adopted for the program. The program was entitled in 2011, and the date of the entitlement was June 29th, 2011, and there were different benefits set up for the residents of the One Treasure Island property management programs. Market rate residents who lived here at that time, and for residents that were going to come after that time, there were no benefits established. However, it was anticipated that advisory services would be provided. So today we have in yellow, we continue to have the One Treasure Island agencies that provide housing on the island. And then on the left, we have those households kind of depicted here in blue, where all of the members of that household were here in 2011. We have households where all of the members came after 2011. Then we have some households where they have both newer residents as well as older residents. For One Treasure Island households, the One Treasure Island member agencies will be building new housing on the island. And as they complete those buildings, they will be transitioning existing residents into the units that they are constructing. So the first building will be constructed by Swords to Plowshares, so all existing Swords to Plowshares residents in good standing, when that project is completed, will move into that building. The second building will be constructed by Catholic Charities in partnership with Mercy Housing, and all existing Catholic Charities households will move into that building when it's completed. For the market rate residents of the villages, as I mentioned, the 2011 date was the critical date, and there were benefits that were set up for the residents at that time, and that there were no benefits provided for commercial leaseholders within the villages or for residents that would come after that. The opportunities that are available to the pre-2011 residents include pre-marketing opportunity to purchase a new condominium with potential down payment assistance, a new rental, either an affordable apartment or a transition unit, or if the household elects to leave the island, an in lieu payment. For those transition units, for pre-DDA households, those units will be constructed within the 100% affordable buildings that TIDA will be constructing in partnership with Mercy and other affordable housing developers. So that's kind of a recap. Since the April meeting, Supervisor Haney's office and TIDA staff have been in communication about what could be done for post-DDA households. And earlier this fall, Supervisor Haney introduced a resolution that was ultimately adopted by the Board of Supervisors, calling for some benefits to be provided to post-DDA residents. And what we are proposing and what is currently being drafted with the City Attorney's Office, and we anticipate bringing to the TIDA board next month, is a program that would provide for pre-DDA or post-DDA residents, those residents that have come since 2011, to participate in the pre-marketing opportunity for new units constructed on the island, market rate units. And also for those households that income qualify for affordable housing, that they would be prioritized for placement in new units constructed on the island ahead of the conventional lottery system utilized by the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. So these changes would provide opportunities to our most vulnerable post-DDA residents but it would not extend the in lieu option to residents at this time, nor would it offer transition units to residents that don't meet the income qualification criteria for affordable units. And it would not extend to commercial leaseholders of the villages. So the expectation is that we will bring this to the TIDA board for consideration next month. But in the meantime, post-DDA residents who want to learn more about what income levels are for potentially qualifying for affordable housing can contact our relocation advisors, TI advisors. The phone number and email address are here. And they can also get more information on or request to be on the pre-marketing list for market rate housing opportunities. So that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Bob. Let me just note, this is not an action item. This is an informational item before the board today. But I will take comments from the public first and then questions from the board. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the board on this issue? Yes, please come forward now.
Well, certainly someone has to say something on this particular subject because we are dealing with the current residents. My name is James Hooker. I've been on the island for 19 years, so I've kind of been in the game a little bit longer than most people. I think the important part about what we're talking about with housing is developing and raising the income of those residents here on the island. Of course, that's a difficult discussion to have publicly, but we certainly need to invest in that aspect of it, and it has to be reflective in community housing partnership tools that allow people to qualify for housing, market rate. And of course, the market rate is a cold calculator. And so, you know, those are some of the realities that we need to deal with as well. This idea that residents have these sort of like opportunities, they don't hold water if a person ain't making no money. I mean, I'm just be candid with you. If you're talking about 40, 50, 60, 70,000, you know, quite a few of the people missed out, no disrespect, on the Facebook, on the tech game, you know, and you can tell about the island. All you have to go do is look at the technical equipment that we have available for us to look for work. It's 50 years old. And if you talked about the grid system and how it breaks down, so I'd like for you to start thinking about how can we truly provide a pathway for long-time residents, low-income residents, which the island was used for. Storage to plowshares. They brought all kind of stuff out here on the island when it was of very little value. But after several buyers and developers, the changeover, it's become a billion-dollar community, and you're here to solve these little technical problems like how we gonna get on and off the island, how we gonna deal with the poor people on the island. Typically, using methods that are designed to fail the low income, the underserved, the undereducated, and the underprivileged, whom you placed on the island. So now he's talking about, okay, so how do we do this in a way where we, as leadership, as political leaders, are not falling into the gentrification trap or whatever else you want to call it. I just don't want to get too technical. I just want to let you know that people, because they may not have the money, doesn't mean...
Yes, I'm sorry.
Doesn't mean that they're not interested in living here on the island.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else?
Mine's just more of a quick comment. I was talking with the people that put up all the boards for the eligibility, and I was hoping to work with them or with you guys in general to create a website that makes it very easy for people to find this information, because some people might not be physically able to go meet with the housing supervisor, or if they can do like video chatting with these advisors and such to make it as accessible as possible for people. I think we should leverage websites and other technology like that that doesn't require people with sometimes their hectic schedules or inability to meet in person, because I think we could just do that in general. So it's more of a comment, but that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Got 3 minutes.
Me again, Jeff Klein, 20-year resident. I thank the board for hearing my comment, which is about providing relocation benefits to residential and commercial tenants. First of all, discrimination by TIDA against post-EDA tenants affects me personally, since 2 of my roommates are post-EDA, and because they're denied their rights under federal and state relocation law. My roommate of 13 years and myself will have to pay much higher rent for the replacement unit we are entitled to under the THR&Rs, which is a 2-bedroom instead of a 4-bedroom. Since we moved from a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, the rent per bedroom in a 2-bedroom is 74% higher than the rent in a 4-bedroom. In addition, I'll have to pay for a parking space and a transit pass, so my rent could nearly triple, which would force me off the island. Some background is helpful. Early in 1999, TIDA sublease agreement with JSCO, John Stewart Company, was finalized with the help of Deputy City Attorney Michael Cohen, who wrongly claimed that Village's tenants could not be considered displaced persons under federal and state relocation law because they're post-acquisition residents. Nonetheless, TIDA staff did draft a waiver and release of relocation rights, and the JSCO sublease required that the waiver and release be attached to all residential leases and rental agreements and be signed by prospective tenants before entering into any residential lease or rental agreement. However, TIDA staff appeared to have not done their due diligence on this matter, as a search on Lexis Legal yields contrary and controlling case law from the California Court of Appeals. In Garcia versus Anthony, 1989, the California Court of Appeals held that all lawful residents who are displaced by a government project are entitled to last resort housing under California Civil Code section 7264.5, regardless of whether they are post-acquisition tenants or not. In this landmark decision, the court wrote, quote, "It is not the intent of relocation law to render displaced persons homeless." Incidentally, businesses can also be displaced persons under relocation law, so I hope the recent resolution put forward by Supervisor Haney, urging expansion of TIA resident relocation and transition benefits, will be expanded to include TIDA's commercial tenants, and I strongly urge TIDA board to heed the resolution, which will be approved by the Board of Supervisors and has the support of Mayor Breed, and will end this unfair discrimination against post-EDA tenants and commercial tenants. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. All right. Please.
My name is Nancy McCormick. I'm a nearly 20-year resident of Treasure Island. I raised 2 boys on this island along with my husband. They went to school here. We have been here for a very long time, and to my boys, this place is home. Now, I'm also one of those that are disabled, and as a result of that disability, I have to have a car. I can't ride on the bus because it puts me in paralyzing pain. Unless you can make it like Greyhound buses with lots of nice cushioned seats, I don't think that's going to happen. I also want to say that I really believe that many of us who are disabled are trying to build businesses here. I can still remember when I was homeless and I saw on the news on TV that Treasure Island was going to be open for people to live there. And when I saw that, I thought, yes, I want to be a part of that community. I want to be a part of that group of people that build something there that makes it a community. And I have done everything I can to do that. I educate people about what the island's about. I educate people how to find things. I was the first one to have a comfort pet. And kids were coming from all over the neighborhood to pet my cat, because they were so desperate for that kind of contact. So I worked with Catholic Charities to see if they would be willing to teach people how to have comfort pets. It's little things like that that really makes this place home. And the point I'm trying to make is, please don't take this away from us by using commercial incentives and making billions of dollars. This is a community, and it's very, very organic. And I beg you to remember, it's an organic community, not just something you can stuff in beautiful architectural gems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Board of Supervisors, thank you very much for coming here tonight on Island Meeting. Always very important to the islanders. Greatly appreciate what you have been doing, how you have been listening, how you have been improving the standards. Matt Haney, big thank you to you for listening to the timber issues, the toll issue, a huge issue that we have been vacillating over for several years now, and we greatly appreciate your input. One point I wanted to quickly make before the night is over is do not forget about the missing middle. We realize that there's a lot of projects going on, or a lot of development going on right now on Yabarwana Island and Treasure Island. We're looking at the floor plans, we're looking at the conditions. There's a lot of people, you heard it over and over and over again. In fact, myself have been speaking at this microphone or a similar one like this for the last, I want to say 18 years. Do not allow Yabarwana Island and or Treasure Island to be turned into Billionaires Island. Allow for people, middle-class people, the middle-class people that supported these projects for all these years, to have a home, to become part of what the new development will bring. We greatly appreciated what has been done for the inclusion of low-income housing. We recognize that a lot of the units that will be built up there will be built for people that can afford it and can make these plans affordable for the city, period. But we ask you kindly to still consider and still remember the ones that have been making this project a reality throughout the last 25 to 30 years, 25 years. And I wanted to remind you to not forget us and find a way to include us, normal people, normal residents of San Francisco that would love to still have a home on here on the islands. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, after a year, Byron Kaufman, just to reinforce what Christoph shared with you and to be detailed, there's a pre-marketing offer or information for people who are DDA. It's been years now. The homes are going on sale in a month. We have no information. No information. Waiting a decade or 2 decades to make maybe the largest decision of our life. We have no information. There's no information available. How will that roll out? So there's tranches of units that become released. The best deal is at the beginning, but then the prices will probably go up. What can be done about that, if anything? So I think there's some concrete things that can be done to help people who want to buy and can buy, but we don't have any information. Thank you very much.
That question I'll direct to Mr. Beck, but I do believe that there has been information that has been given, Mr. Beck, through the marketing, through our management people.
I believe Mr. Kaufman is speaking specifically about pricing information. Pricing information is not been released yet, but information on unit sizes and that type of information has been made available.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Last chance. All right. I'll open it up to the board. Supervisor Haney, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your comments on this. There's just a few things that I wanted to clarify that I think are very important with where we will be voting on related to post-DDA. The first thing is that the things that we're doing with post-DDA households will not at all impact the benefits that are being made available and should be guaranteed for pre-DDA households. There's not any competition, there's anything like that. The commitment that's been made to pre-DDA is incredibly important and has to be fulfilled, and the information and all of that. So this is not at all competing in any way with that. What I did feel was important, and it was based on a lot of feedback that I've heard from residents of the island, not just post-DDA, but everyone. This is obviously something that affects everyone and affects the community here, is that there was incredible lack of fairness, an unfairness in the fact that people may have been living here for even 20 years at the point at which they would be asked to move and have no benefits that were being made available to them, other than some advisory benefits. I think when they created the DDA, they thought that the development was going to begin and happen at a level that it obviously has not. The timeline is pushed way far back, and so people have been here for a long time and are part of this community and do deserve benefits. The other thing is that there will be a lot more affordable housing that's built than the number of units that will be required for pre-DDA. So pre-DDA folks will have access to affordable units if they qualify, but then it would be open at that point to everybody from anywhere in San Francisco. It seems that there should be a next level priority for people who are post-DDA who are income qualified. That's what this policy will do. The other thing that it will do is it will allow people who are post-DDA to start to plan accordingly, to see if they income qualify, to receive counseling, to start to know that that will be there for them, because they will have a very good chance, if they are income qualified, of getting housing through the priority. The last thing I want to say about this is that I don't think that the conversation regarding everyone on the island is done yet. This is what we could do through TIDA that didn't require us to open up the development agreement and have conversations that I do think need to be had. One of the things that I do think still needs to be discussed are the relocation benefits, or the benefits that are given to households at the point at which they're actually asked to leave the island. If you have been living here for some amount of time and you are pre-DDA or post-DDA or whatever, and you're actually being told you have to leave because you don't qualify for anything or you don't get into the housing, I think there should be some benefits that come with that. I'll give you an example, which is that under the rent ordinance, if you have an owner move-in, you have to give significant relocation payments to the people you are displacing. That's how it works in San Francisco if you're under the rent ordinance. Essentially what this is, and it's not income qualified. It's for whoever is there. If you're told you have to leave because the person is moving in or displacing you for whatever reason, they have to pay relocation benefits. And I think that's something that should be extended to everybody on the island. It is currently extended in the form of in lieu benefits for pre-DDA households. But what we're able to do with this is make sure that for post-DDA households, there is a priority, and they will have access in a priority sense if they income qualify to some of the affordable housing opportunities. And I think that's a very important and necessary and essential step for people to be able to plan ahead, and for people who live here who do income qualify, even if they've moved here after 2011, to be able to have access to the housing opportunities here. So that's why we did this, and that's what it will do. And pre-DDA folks don't have any reason to think that it affects their benefits in any way.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions from board members? Okay. Hearing none. Okay. Next item, please.
Item number 9, SF Department of Emergency Management, Emergency Preparedness and Planning.
Good evening. Everyone excited to hear about the Department of Emergency Management? Thanks for staying. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty quickly because obviously it's late. If there's anything that is of interest to the board that you would like me to dive into, you let me know. So we are the Department of Emergency. Is someone moving this for me? Is this it? Oh, I just hit the green button. Easy. Okay. What do? We manage emergencies, the everyday and not so everyday emergencies in San Francisco. So essentially, we're kind of divided into two major sections or operations. One is 911, which most people are familiar with, and then the other is our general emergency services. So 911 are the Division of Emergency Communications. Basically, we answer every single police, fire, and medical call. So if you need a police officer, an ambulance, or a firefighter, you call us. You call 911, and we dispatch. If you call the police non-emergency, those are also our dispatchers. We have about 142 individual human beings who are answering those calls, who are employees of the Department of Emergency Management. Those calls are divided. Basically, the calls are 80% law enforcement, 16% emergency medical, and 4% fire. Calls have increased 44% over the last 7 years. Cities growing, getting more impacted, we get more calls. Hopefully some of the folks in the audience had a chance to check us out in the back. One of the big things that we really are trying to focus on is getting people to make the right call. Only about 60% of the calls that come in are actually emergency calls. The other ones are either just not emergency calls or they are mistakes, the pocket call as they are known. So emergency services, that's the division that works on we basically do planning, provide overall recommendations and guidance for the city on preparedness, response, training, and exercises. So we do all the emergency plans, we train, we exercise, we do major event coordination, and then we respond to emergencies. I'm not going to get too deep into this. This is sort of how emergency services work. It seems like it's maybe a little late in the night to get into it. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to talk about it. One of the things, probably the most important functions that we have in emergency services, we do house the San Francisco Emergency Operations Center that is on Turk Street. And that's where we activate for planned and unplanned events. That's where we gather all the city departments, anyone who's responding to events. We come in there and work together to coordinate and plan within the city, but also request mutual aid if that's necessary, and disseminate emergency information. The policy group is also is led by our mayor and is held at the Operations Center. Public information, which probably is of interest. So the alerts that go out for Treasure Island, we Department of Emergency Management, send those out. And if there are changes in the way that those need to go out for incidents on the island, we can do that. Our current, sir, you brought up the every 4 hours. That's the procedure that we have in place that we worked with TIDA and PUC on. It's totally changeable if that's needed. So, we can definitely talk about that. So at Alert SF, we do public alerts around incidents like power outages, personal preparedness, community outreach, et cetera. We also have a preparedness and education component. So just like tonight, Nubia was here earlier. We will attend any event that you invite us to. We are all about getting information out to the residents of San Francisco. We are at risk for a lot of things that go on here, not earthquake being one of them. And so the more prepared that our folks are, the better it is going to be for all of us. Any questions?
And how does the resident sign up for the alerts?
Sure. So to sign up, it's very easy. On your cell phone, you just put your zip code in to 888. Oh gosh, I'm getting this wrong. 888-777. I think I have that. I'm sorry, it's backwards. It's on the flyer back there. I'll double check. And then, or you can go to alertsf.org sf.org or sf72.org. And yes, sorry, 888-777. It's also been I know it's a long day for everyone. So let me repeat that. To sign up for Alert SF, you put in your zip code and in the text box, and then you text to 888-777, and you are signed up.
Okay.
It's as easy as that.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to take any comments or questions from the audience. Okay, seeing none, the board. Yes, Mr. Dunlop.
Just one quick question is, whenever I dial 311, I get Oakland.
Yeah, so when you said that earlier, there is, I'm sure there's a 7-digit number that you can call, and I'm happy to get that for you. Just like there's a non-emergency number that you can call for
Right.
that.
Yeah, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
It's just more for other people if they.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I can bring that back to 311 to my colleagues there to see what in fact, I'm meeting with the director tomorrow, so I will bring that up and see if that's a common.
Because it just can't be me. I can't be the only person on this.
Yeah, I'm sure not. Yeah.
Having that happen. So I appreciate that. And,
Sure.
my comment about the calls or the notices earlier, it was just that, and it also could be my reception, some of them seem to come quickly and then change. And so I didn't think that the information, I'm not going to say the quality, but the information that was available, it might have been better to wait sometimes and to have, like, this is what's happening, that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gusti, do you have something?
Yeah, I think I wanted to give more of a shout out than a question to DEM. In my day job, we've worked closely with your organization, and I would encourage other businesses to reach out and get involved with DEM. It's a big help. And also, as a resident in San Francisco, I put my number in and I get all the great alerts to stay away from this intersection, or there's a fire over here. So it really is helpful just in your everyday today life and not necessarily a major disaster.
Right. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. So hearing no other comments from the board, next item, please.
Item number 10, Yerba Buena Island Habitat Management Plan Update.
Good evening, Treasure Island Board of Directors. Peter Brastow, Department of Environment. Last but not least, hopefully, you can take a vote after. So yeah, I work at the Department of Environment. I've been working with TIDA out here on the island for several years, and happy to be here to give you a kind of an biannual update on what we've been doing. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to give you kind of a whirlwind tour of activities. But before I do that, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the biodiversity resolution that was passed last year at the Board of Supervisors and how that relates to the work out here, how TIDA fits into that. And then we're also going to dwell a little bit on one of the items that was in your packet, which is all about incorporating biodiversity into the built environment. Okay, let's see if I get this right. Okay, so just for those who aren't totally familiar, so we have a habitat management plan for Yerba Buena Island, which was mandated as part of the Treasure Island development documents several years ago and was created in 2011. And so that guides the management, stewardship, restoration of Yerba Buena Island, and also provides some inspiration for what we can do in Treasure Island. And this is just an image, a map of the different plant communities that exist on Yerba Buena Island. Okay, and so this is just kind of a quick summary of some of the themes that we'll be going through tonight. So how we plan for revegetation in association with the horizontal development that's happening on Yerba Buena Island, the water tanks and the movement of McCullough Road and things like that, actual ecological restoration of the native habitat areas, community stewardship, as well as collecting information on the critters and flora, fauna, and fungi that we have out here, biological inventory. So those are some of the themes that we'll hit tonight. And I'm giving a lot of presentations, as I always do, and right now I'm really emphasizing that we're really in a state of crisis globally in terms of biodiversity, just like the climate, the overall environmental crisis. scientists are using terms like insect apocalypse, and that we're going to lose up to 1 million species by the end of the century. So it's really quite dramatic. And here in California, actually, between Thanksgiving of 2017 and 2018, the monarch butterfly, the overwintering monarch butterfly population decreased by 85%. So it's been a 99% decrease since the 70s of the California monarch butterfly population. So it's really something. And but scientists are raising a call to action, activists and scientists, and they're saying nature needs half. So literally half of Earth, land and waters, should be set aside for nature. Well, as I was putting this presentation together, I realized, wow, we're sort of doing that on Treasure Island and certainly on Yerba Buena Island. So when you look at this image, it's a nice representation of locally that global vision that scientists and activists are promulgating. And so now, just to settle in a little briefly on the biodiversity policy that was passed on April 18th of 2018, April 9th, 2018. And basically what it did was it's citywide. It said, hey, biodiversity is a high priority for San Francisco. And it set out a framework for interagency collaboration, for nature-based initiatives, for connecting people to nature, for really elevating the operationalization of biodiversity in all the different departments. So it named 15 departments, including TIDA, including the Treasure Island Development Authority. And so Peter Somerville, so I convene an interagency working group of those 15 agencies. Peter Somerville represents TIDA on that working group. And we've all been collaborating together to implement that resolution since last year. And that culminated just last week, where we delivered a report to the Board of Supervisors and made a presentation on Monday to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And so I'll go through these quickly. This is the vision that's in the resolution, and these are the 15 agencies that I mentioned. And all of this is part of the overall San Francisco Climate Action Strategy. It's important to mention that as well. So the conservation and restoration of biodiversity, the urban forestry, applying compost to rangelands, all these actions sequester carbon, store carbon, but also have all these other environmental benefits, and obviously restoring biodiversity and connecting people to nature. And so, and one of the ongoing projects that we've been working on with some of our other agency colleagues is something called Biodiversity Design Guidelines. And so I put this up to tee up this other item, what you have in your packet today, which was a memo that we put together that basically I wrote in consultation with Peter and Bob and our colleagues in the developer team, all about bringing biodiversity into the built environment. And you can see this image is from Singapore. I had a privilege of being there in October. And they really know how to do it. This is a building. It doesn't look like it. It looks like a forest, but you're actually in the interior of the building here looking at all this incredible vegetation. So, but we can do it here in San Francisco. This is what we want to do all over the city, but specifically on Treasure Island, what we did is, and I'm going to skip ahead to this slide. So Bob asked me to basically review all of the documents that sort of govern the development and that have some relationship to open space and greening and biodiversity for Treasure Island and for Yerba Buena Island, really with an eye toward what are their opportunities, how can we articulate prioritizing bringing biodiversity into the built environment. So that's what the memo basically does, and it really lays out. It says, hey, all these documents laid out this really inspiring vision, the sustainability vision. But if you really want to see that vision on the ground, then you need to basically, revegetate landscape with local native plants that will provide habitat for local wildlife. It can't be done just by any old greening. So we don't want to just go from gray to green. We want to go from gray to green to biodiverse. So that's the whole point of that memo that we drafted and that we've been working closely with the developer on. We kind of went back and forth on it, and they were happy with how it came out. And now we want to bring it forward to all the players who are going to, have something to do with landscaping throughout the island, whether it's the market rate development, whether it's the commercial development, whether it's the nonprofit and affordable housing. So throughout Treasure Island, we want to bring that nature of Yerba Buena Island and of San Francisco into the built environment. And we can do that by planting local native trees like the California buckeye for the tiger swallowtail and just emphasizing that we have an incredible palette to do this. 467 plants that are native to San Francisco that still live in the city limits, which is mind-boggling considering that in California, the third largest state, we have 6,500, which is a lot. But in this little postage stamp of San Francisco, which is actually 95% developed, we still have this incredible palette of local native plants. So we have a lot to work with. And this is actually, you don't have to try to read that, but that's kind of our official island native plant palette, so which is basically a subset of that 467 for San Francisco. So we use this as a guide for all of our revegetation planning for all the horizontal development on Yerba Buena Island, and then we want to take this and we want to tailor it also for Treasure Island, as I was saying. Okay, so moving on to just quickly mentioning about future upcoming restoration projects that we want to do. I may have mentioned this at a previous meeting, but we worked with the developer. We have a big long list of actual capital restoration projects that we want to do on Yerba Buena Island, in close coordination with the development, but also in some cases outside the footprint of the development area. And so that's a multi-million-dollar, program really that will go on for many years. But this is a map in the center of the slide that just kind of shows you all the numbers and all the locations all over Yerba Buena Island where we're going to be doing that work. And just to highlight the coordination that we do with the development all the time. This is an image, of course, of the former McCalla Road, which is, and the million-gallon tank, I think it was just to your left there. It was taken out a few months ago. And then to your right is basically kind of the existing habitat area, the existing woodland. And so, on a weekly basis, we're having to make sure that, the development activities are in harmony with the natural environment of Yerba Buena Island. And this slide is just to emphasize that. And so, for example, preserving the native buckeye grove there where the new green infrastructure site is going to be. And then also coordinating with the transportation project. So this is an image where the new on-ramp and off-ramp is going to be, let's say, I guess, eastbound on-ramp and off-ramp going on 80 East. So this is like by quarters 8 or 9, 8 and 9. I think they're both right there to your right. This is a shot of beautiful shot in the winter of the polypody fern. Luckily, when the Southgate project does rebuild that ramps area, most of this is going to be preserved, which is why I put this picture up there, because it's not going to get wasted. But it's going to be quite a project, because behind you, kind of behind us in the perspective of looking at this photo, there's going to be a huge retaining wall in order to accommodate that. But luckily, we learned from the CTA representative that as you get close to the actual highway, that native habitat is going to remain. So that's some really ongoing coordination we do with them. So this was another project where we had to basically work together with the transportation agency to make sure that ultimately the maintenance of this site, which they revegetated, is being done. And so we actually are contracting with a guy named Josiah Clark, who is a local San Franciscan, who brings out a really hardy crew and is bashing the weeds that are coming up in this site since it was revegetated. And that's going pretty smoothly. So I just wanted to bring that up, we're trying to stay on top of all these sites that have just kind of come down the pipe, right, as a result of not only the development, but also the transportation improvements. And so just moving on to the Natural Resources Stewardship Program in general. This, of course, is an image of the oak woodland there along Treasure Island Road, where we have actually we've recently contracted with LEDGE, Literacy for Environmental Justice, to follow up on the restoration project that we did there to make sure that the investment that we made of removing the really invasive weed remains. And so they're working underneath the woodland now on a monthly basis with their crew, kind of incorporated into their workforce development program that they do as part of their native plant nursery work, which you'll see a picture of in a second. But so this whole understory used to all be South African rice grass, and now that's all beautiful native California miner's lettuce growing underneath the oak grove. So that's a great success story, going really smoothly. So just in terms of some of the people and the groups that have been out here as part of the stewardship program, this is actually our San Francisco Environment Now crew, our Green Jobs program. They came out for one day last year. On one of our work days, I think working at the nursery. And so this was another day at the nursery. There's Peter Somerville in the middle, and this is the crew from Literacy for Environmental Justice. And one of our island residents, who was a longtime resident actually, and now a volunteer at the nursery, even on her own time outside of the stewardship program. So we've been really partnering a lot going to the nursery, because this time of year there's not as much weeding to do considering how everything's torn up. So there aren't as many restoration sites to weed, but there's a ton to do in the nursery. So I've been really glad that we have this partnership with Literacy for Environmental Justice to go and help them on the Wednesdays when we want to each month. And this whole phenomenon of a native plant nursery is a really important thing for us to be paying attention to, because citywide we have a real need for the supply of local native plants to fulfill this vision of a biodiversity, and it's the same thing here on Treasure Island. So right now we just have this relatively small nursery there at the site down that way. I think it's H and 9th or whatever. But what we really want is a long-term, permanent, community facility of producing local native plants on Treasure Island. And just some really amazing notes. The little caterpillar there that you can see on the photo on the left, it's hard to see, but there's 4 or 5 in there, one on the right. Here's a close-up. So this is the caterpillar of the pipevine swallowtail butterfly, which is this guy or gal. And this is a big butterfly, so a really good flyer. So if you plant this, if you plant the Dutchman's pipevine, which is what this plant is, these are actually all salvaged from Yerba Buena Island. And so if you plant that on Treasure Island, you will very likely get that butterfly flying there and laying her eggs. So it's pretty amazing coevolutionary relationship between the plant and the butterfly. Speaking of wildlife, the same guy who's bringing out a really hardy crew to weed over there at the Nimitz Slopes, he's also a really top-notch wildlife ecologist, so he's doing annual wildlife monitoring for TIDA. Now has been doing it for several years, which is giving us great information on the bird populations. That's just an image on your left that shows you many different bird species that he's observed out here. And on to native plant landscaping, which I've talked to you about before, but just we've got some new stuff coming up, so I wanted to highlight that. This is, of course, the site over at the across from the Araceli Cafe. And we've been collaborating with Rubicon Landscaping, of course, on these sites. This is the one right out in front of the ship shape that we planted last year. And this is a picture I took this morning. Came out pretty good. That's a California coffee berry looking beautiful in the foreground there. It was pretty foggy this morning. So yeah, we've been coordinating with Rubicon to put these sites in and maintain them. And then this is the site right out here outside the back door. And this is a photo I took today. And on Saturday, we're actually going to be planting this out with another crop, about, I think, 63 plants from the nursery. And we'll be doing, so that's, there we go, there's the flyer. So Saturday, 12 to 2, meet right out here outside that door. And we'll be shoveling in the ground and putting in some more plants. And let's see. Oh, and then finally, we did have our 3rd annual BioBlitz back in April, so it's 3 years in a row. Really successful. But since a lot of the Yerba Buena Island is under construction, as is Treasure Island, of course, a little harder to move a lot of people around. So we still got about I think 30 people out that day, in collaboration, of course, with the California Academy of Sciences and our wonderful colleagues in the Citizen Science Group, Rebecca and Allison. And just some critters that we saw that day. And finally, wanted to just highlight, who I forgot in terms of all the different partnerships that we have, but in particular, Golden Gate Audubon Society, which is a 100-year-old environmental organization here in the Bay Area, and part of their region is San Francisco. They have been partnering with us to help us bring groups out on the Wednesday workdays. So I believe this is Salesforce. So we thank Golden Gate Audubon for that, and Recology for the bins, for the green bins. It's terrific. So we can make sure we manage the green waste appropriately. And let's see, did I forget anybody else? No, I think that's it in terms of other partners. And then finally, this was just more of a note to myself, just to mention that Peter and I have been working with Bob and really trying to think about how we plan for the future in terms of maintenance and operations, O&M, and what the needs are going to be in terms of space for the Natural Resource Stewardship Program going forward. I think that's enough for tonight.
Oh, Peter, excellent.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. And Peter.
Really uplifting to hear about all the things that are going on, and so much, it has to be on the forefront is sustainability and biodiversity. And we're actually at the cutting edge, and so we need to keep that up in all the work that we do. Thank you so much, Peter. Any comments from the audience? Hearing none. Comments from the board?
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Good. Next item.
Item number 11, discussion of future agenda items by directors.
Are there any future items that the board would like to bring up? Hearing none. Next item.
Meeting is adjourned.
Adjourned. Thank you all.
Great job.
This long.
Thank you.
It's quick for
Quick.
meetings.